What if the worst night of your life wasn't just a tragic accident, but the start of something far more sinister? 14-year-old Joy Carter expected a simple night out, a first date filled with nervous excitement. Instead, she found herself trapped in a nightmare. A reckless driver, a violent crash, the sharp sting of shattered glass, and the wail of sirens. But as she woke up in the sterile walls of a hospital, bruised and disoriented, the real danger was just beginning. Accused of drug use, a doctor who seemed more enemy than healer. Her father, Adam Carter, a legendary biker with an unbreakable will, racing against time to clear her name. How do you fight for the truth when the system is built against you? And just how far will a father go to protect his daughter? Join us in reflecting on this true story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification for more daily stories like this. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you are what. For we would love to hear from you. Joy Carter was 14 years old and lived in a sprawling modern home that gleamed under the late afternoon sun. The airy rooms and minimalist decor revealed a life of privilege, but for all its elegance, the house felt empty without her parents. Her mother was on a business trip, and her father, Adam Carter, a legendary biker known for his imposing presence, was away at a major motorcycle event. Adam had always been protective of his daughter, but that evening, Joy was home alone, nervously anticipating her first real date. When Ryan pulled up in one of his father's luxury cars, Joy felt a flutter in her stomach. Tall, with meticulously styled hair and wearing crisp clothes, Ryan exuded a confidence that both excited and unsettled her. She had hoped for a simple night out at a new downtown restaurant, but from the moment she settled into the passenger seat, something felt off. A strange, cloying smell clung to the car's interior. "What's that smell?" Joy asked, wrinkling her nose. Ryan brushed off her concern, blaming an odd air freshener. He promised the scent would fade, and his easy grin loosened Joy's nerves, at least for a moment. They joked as Ryan pulled the car out of the driveway, and Joy relaxed enough to anticipate a fun evening. Traffic was surprisingly light, and Ryan soon began to show off behind the wheel, weaving between lanes at increasing speeds. At first, Joy laughed along, chalking his behavior up to teenage bravado. Yet the closer they got to the highway, the more erratic his driving became. His eyes left the road for dangerously long intervals, and his words started to slur. Joy's heart pounded. Something was definitely wrong. "Slow down, Ryan," she urged, her voice quivering with unease. He flashed a reckless smile, then pressed the accelerator harder. "Small, Joy. Live a little," he taunted. She braced herself, hands gripping the seat. The night air roared past the windows, and the darkness outside felt suddenly menacing. They sped along until Ryan attempted a reckless swerve past a lumbering truck. Time seemed to stretch painfully as Joy glimpsed the truck's massive grille looming in the windshield. The squeal of tires, the deafening horn, and the sudden lurch of the car merged into a single, horrifying moment. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and the impact threw Joy's body forward in a sickening jolt. The car spun off the road, rolling several times before coming to a violent stop. When the world finally settled, Joy was hanging upside down, her seatbelt digging into her torso. Everything hurt. She could hear panicked voices outside, footsteps racing toward the wreckage. Through the shattered windshield, she spotted Ryan's unconscious form on the pavement. He hadn't worn his seatbelt and had been hurled clear of the car. Sirens approached, their wail piercing the chaos. Dazed and in excruciating pain, Joy tried to speak, but her voice was lost in the flurry of paramedics and onlookers. Her last conscious image was the swirl of red and blue lights and a dozen hands reaching into the mangled vehicle to retrieve her. She came to in a bright hospital corridor, surrounded by the sterile scent of antiseptics and the whir of machinery. Disoriented, she heard a nurse explain that she had been in a serious accident. The mention of Ryan's critical condition made Joy's stomach lurch. She cared about him, yet confusion and anger flooded her mind as she recalled his reckless driving. The nurse also informed her that nobody had managed to reach her parents yet. Her mother's call went to voicemail, and her father was at a massive biker gathering out of cell range. Hours trickled by in a haze of medical tests and worried whispers. Finally, Joy was moved to a small private room for overnight observation. That was when a white-coated figure swept in, introducing himself as Dr. Richard Calloway. At first, she barely registered his name, still groggy from medication. But his demeanor chilled her. His examinations were abrupt, his manner brusque, and she sensed an undercurrent of hostility in his voice. He drew blood with an uncomfortably rough jab, prompting Joy to gasp. Instead of apologizing, Dr. Calloway muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously cruel. Through her haze of pain, she couldn't grasp the full meaning of his words, but an uneasy knot formed in her stomach. As Joy drifted in and out of fitful sleep, her father was finally alerted to her condition. Adam Carter rode through the night to reach his daughter, unaware that the real danger was not just the accident, but the sinister prejudice lurking within the very hospital walls. Adam Carter's boots thundered down the hospital hallway, echoing his mounting dread. News of Joy's accident had reached him hours after it happened, and he'd sped back on his bike, leaving the biker event without a second thought. His heart clenched at the sight of his daughter's pale face and the lines of fatigue etched into her features. Yet amid his relief at finding her alive, Adam sensed something was amiss. Standing beside Joy's bed was Dr. Richard Calloway, the physician assigned to her care. The man's voice dripped with condescension as he explained that Joy's lab work indicated high drug levels. "Our tests show significant traces," he remarked, barely glancing at Joy. "This suggests your daughter may have been using substances prior to the accident." Adam stiffened, his gaze flicking to Joy, who shook her head weakly. "Dad, I swear I didn't do anything," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Adam believed her instantly. Joy had never shown the slightest inclination toward drugs or reckless behavior, despite that fateful night's events. Before Adam could voice his outrage, Dr. Calloway continued with a dismissive shrug. "We'll run additional tests, of course, but the results so far speak for themselves." Adam clenched his jaw. He'd spent his life around tough crowds, rowdy bikers, but none of that prepared him for the cold wave of fury that swept over him upon hearing a doctor accuse his daughter of something so out of character. Joy squirmed in discomfort as Dr. Calloway adjusted in foreline. "Careful," she winced, but he didn't ease off. Instead, he flashed her a hardened look, muttering, "Hold still," under his breath. Adam's protective instincts flared. He stepped forward, his broad shoulders blocking the doctor. "Take it easy," Adam warned, voice dangerously low. "She's in pain." Dr. Calloway turned, eyes flashing with a mix of annoyance and something more sinister. In that charged moment, Adam caught a flicker of an attitude he'd encountered too many times in his life, an ugly prejudice aimed at people who looked like him. "I have over 20 years' experience," the doctor declared icily. "I don't need tips from an outsider." Joy's face went pale, and Adam felt his blood boil. Yet the hallway soon filled with other nurses and a flurry of bustling staff. Dr. Calloway strode off, spouting orders to a colleague. Adam squeezed Joy's hand, leaning in so only she could hear. "Don't worry, kid. I'll handle this." Tension lingered in the air after the doctor's departure. Joy struggled to rest, haunted by the fiasco of the accident. She kept repeating, "I never touched drugs, Dad," and Adam hushed her gently, vowing to get to the truth. Later, a police officer stopped by to take Joy's statement. Shaken but resolute, she recalled Ryan's erratic driving, the suspicious odor in the car, and how he insisted it was some new air freshener. She described her terror when the car spun out of control, and how Ryan had been thrown from the vehicle without a seatbelt. The officer listened and took notes, but the presence of the hospital's official lab results loomed large, throwing suspicion on Joy instead. When Adam tried to argue that the results must be wrong, the officer pointed out that hospital records were official documents, and that altering them would be a serious offense. If they say there were drugs in her system, we have to take it into account, he said apologetically. Adam's frustration mounted, but he bit his tongue, determined to gather actual proof, as if to confirm his doubts about the hospital's motives. Nurse Nancy quietly approached after the officer left. Her eyes darted nervously as she confided, "Mr. Carter, something doesn't add up." Joy showed no signs of impairment when she was first admitted. She was coherent, responsive, and her vitals were stable. Then why do these test results say otherwise? Adam demanded, voice tight with suspicion. Nancy hesitated. All I can say is that Dr. Calloway has taken a particular interest in your daughter's case. He personally oversaw the tests. That's unusual. Normally, the lab team handles that without a lead physician hovering so closely. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden approach of two security guards. The men wore stiff expressions and insisted Adam would need to leave if he couldn't remain calm. Adam's glare nearly set them ablaze. "I'm perfectly calm," he said tersely, though the tension in his neck muscles told another story. He stepped into the hallway for air, leaving Joy with Nancy, who offered a small smile of reassurance. Adam paced, heart pounding, mind churning over the possibility that someone was framing his daughter. A swirl of dread, anger, and fierce protectiveness fueled his next move. He needed more information, and he needed it fast. Adam found himself stepping back into the corridor, searching for answers. If Dr. Calloway was behind this nightmare, Adam would stop at nothing to expose the truth, even if it meant confronting an entire institution determined to cover its tracks. Adam's frustration reached its breaking point when he tried to return to Joy's room and was blocked by two stern-faced security guards. "I'm sorry, sir," one guard stated, adopting a tone that implied anything but sympathy. "Dr. Calloway doesn't want you interfering with your daughter's care." Adam drew a sharp breath. "He can't keep me from seeing my own daughter." His voice echoed off the hospital walls, attracting stares from passers-by. Under normal circumstances, he might have pulled back to avoid making a scene, but these weren't normal circumstances. The tension escalated rapidly. One guard grabbed Adam's arm, and Adam reflexively shoved him away. "Back off," he warned, eyes filled with a tempered rage. It was enough to summon more hospital security. Before he knew it, Adam was outnumbered. Voices rose, arms tangled, and soon a nurse, alarmed by the commotion, hit a security alert button. Dr. Calloway arrived on the scene wearing a look of smug disapproval. "I want this man removed," he declared, pointing at Adam as though he were a menacing criminal. "He assaulted me and is causing a disturbance in the hospital." His voice carried, ensuring everyone in the vicinity heard. Adam's fists balled, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You're lying," he growled. "You're the one harming my daughter, and you're not going to get away with it." At that, Calloway sneered. He glanced around, locking eyes with a few onlookers. This man's daughter tested positive for illicit substances. He barged in here with no respect for hospital protocol, and he struck me first. Adam lunged, heart pounding, but a guard intervened, twisting his arm behind his back. Dr. Calloway stumbled backward with a theatrical moan. "You see? He's a violent biker. Exactly what I expected." A swirl of confusion and alarm rippled through the staff. Adam was well known in many circles, renowned for his protective loyalty and tough exterior, but not for senseless brutality. Still, the optics looked bad. A furious father, an injured doctor, and a teenage girl with alleged drugs in her system. Within minutes, the local police arrived. Lights flashed outside the hospital entrance, and an officer stepped forward to calm the crowd. "Everybody stand back," he ordered. Another officer gestured for Adam to step aside. Adam's pulse thundered in his ears as he tried to explain himself. Dr. Calloway is framing Joy. He wants to pin the blame on her to protect somebody else. The story sounded bizarre without proof, and the hospital staff hovered uncertainly, unclear whom to trust. "One step at a time," cautioned the officer. "We have a report of an assault on a doctor. Let's sort this out." Adam soon found himself cuffed and escorted out to the police cruiser, his shouts echoing off the hospital's pristine walls. Through a glass pane, he caught a fleeting glimpse of Joy's room down the hall. He could only imagine how frightened she must have felt. As he was led away, Dr. Calloway affected a pained expression, pressing a hand dramatically to his jaw. "Officers, please be careful," the doctor said, feigning concern. "This man is clearly dangerous." Adam wanted to roar back, to reveal the doctor's racist remarks and malicious attitude, but the officers only tightened their grip, urging him forward. Outside, a small crowd had formed, some nurses, a few curious patients, and even a couple of strangers filming on their phones. Adam's biker reputation was no secret, so the sight of him being arrested drew quite a stir. He held his head high, though inside, guilt knotted his stomach. How could he protect Joy if he was stuck in a police cell? The patrol car door slammed, and Adam felt the cold steel of the cuffs pressing into his wrists. He thought of Joy, alone in that hospital room with a doctor who seemed determined to ruin her. Adam's mind whirled with questions. Why frame her for drug use? Was Ryan involved? And how far would Dr. Calloway go to hide the truth? By the time the patrol car pulled up at the station, Adam's temper had cooled, replaced by steely resolve. In a holding area, he made his single phone call to a longtime friend, Bones, a fellow biker with connections and resources. "I need help," Adam muttered into the phone, his voice low. "They're trying to pin false charges on Joy." "I know it." He paced the cramped cell as minutes turned into an hour, relief washing over him when an attorney showed up, a man named James Reeves. Courtesy of Bones' quick work, the lawyer's crisp suit and sharp gaze signaled competence. Soon, Reeves convinced the authorities to release Adam pending further investigation, hinting at a countersuit if they held him without substantial evidence. Once freed, Adam wasted no time. He roared back to the hospital on his motorcycle, pulling into the lot just as dawn broke, the rising sun casting ominous shadows across the building. Adjusting his jacket and stepping inside, Adam swore he would unravel whatever twisted plot Dr. Calloway had hatched and saved Joy, no matter how many walls he had to break through. Back in the hospital, Adam reunited briefly with Joy, who looked more fragile than before. An odd sedation seemed to weigh her down, though she insisted she hadn't received any new medication beyond the standard painkillers. Something was off. Before he could question the staff, 2 security guards appeared at the doorway again. This time, Adam's lawyer, James Reeves, was with him, intervening before another standoff could ensue. "She's his daughter," Reeves told the guards calmly. "Unless there's a medical reason to forbid visitation, we have the right to be here. You want to test that in court?" The threat of legal action made the guards hesitate, allowing Adam inside. Joy squeezed her father's hand, relief shining in her tired eyes. After a few minutes, Nurse Nancy entered with measured steps. She cast a wary glance at the guards. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, "I've done some looking around, and I noticed inconsistencies in Joy's chart. The sedative in her system was never prescribed. Her initial tests were negative for any controlled substances, but somehow a second test came back positive for multiple drugs. That second test has only one signature on it, Dr. Calloway's." Adam's blood ran cold. "He's poisoning her to make it look like she's on drugs," he growled, his anger barely contained. Nancy nodded, her jaw tight. "I can't prove it yet, but I suspect that's exactly what's happening." Adam looked at Joy's weary face, the drip at her arm. "We need evidence, hard evidence," he said, "and we need to find out why he's targeting her." Nancy leaned closer, her voice trembling with urgency. "I checked the patient database. Ryan's full name is Ryan Calloway. He's the doctor's son. Adam inhalit sharply." Everything suddenly made sense. Covering up Ryan's wrongdoing at Joy's expense was a twisted but obvious motive. Together, Nancy and Adam formed a plan. They would access the hospital system to retrieve the original, unaltered files. If they could prove Joy's initial tests were clean and that Ryan's were not, they could expose Dr. Calloway. But it was risky. "We'll time it for the night shift when fewer staff are around," Nancy suggested. Dr. Calloway tends to head home by midnight. That evening, as hush fell over the corridors, Nancy guided Adam to a dimly lit nurse's station. With the click of a keycard, she logged into the secure system. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Adam kept watch, heart pounding, expecting to see a security guard or the doctor himself appear at any moment. "Got it," Nancy murmured, scanning lines of data. She located Joy's initial admission record, which showed no drugs beyond standard analgesics. Another file listed Ryan Calloway's toxicology, clearly indicating marijuana and other substances. The entire story was spelled out in digital text. Nancy inserted a USB drive and began copying the files. As the files transferred, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Nancy's eyes widened. Without warning, Dr. Calloway strode into view, his gaze locking on the pair. "What are you doing?" he demanded, voice taut with fury. Adam stepped forward, blocking the doctor from the computer. "We know about Ryan," Adam said, voice low and menacing. "And we know you tampered with Joy's records. It's over." Dr. Calloway's face went pale, then twisted in rage. "Security," he hollered, lunging for the computer. Adam caught his arm before he could reach the keyboard. They grappled briefly, both men fueled by desperation. A nurse down the hall spotted the altercation and shouted for help, summoning staff and additional guards. "You think the word of a biker and a nosy nurse will hold up against mine?" Dr. Calloway snarled, breathing heavily. "I'll ruin you both." But Nancy stood her ground, brandishing the USB drive. "I have the original documents. I'll show them to the hospital board, the police, anyone who'll listen." Security guards barreled around the corner, pulling Adam and Dr. Calloway apart yet again. This time, before the doctor could feign innocence, Nancy spoke out in a clear, level voice. "He's been falsifying medical records to protect his son. Ask the lab techs. Check Ryan Calloway's chart. You'll see that the real tests implicate him, not Joy Carter." Dr. Calloway's mouth opened in protest, but no words came out. Fear momentarily flickered across his features as more people gathered. The corridor buzzed with confusion. Some recognized Dr. Calloway's name and prestigious standing. Others saw a cornered man unwilling to relinquish his facade. Suddenly, an alarm blared, another code from Joy's wing. Adam's heart clenched. "Joy!" he exclaimed, shoving past the guards. Nancy rushed after him, leaving Dr. Calloway behind. They found Joy's room in chaos, a flurry of nurses and doctors working to stabilize her. Machines beeped angrily, and Joy's face was ashen. Adam hovered outside the cluster of medics, powerless to help. "What's happening?" he demanded, desperate for answers. A nurse shot him a grave look. "She's had a severe reaction to something in her system. We're doing everything we can." As tension filled the air, Adam turned his head to see Dr. Calloway slipping away from the crowd, heading for a side corridor. The man was making a run for it. Rage flared like a spark in Adam's chest. He tore after the doctor, determined to stop him from fleeing and to hold him responsible for Joy's condition. Adam caught up with Dr. Calloway near a back stairwell. Furious and frantic, he grabbed the doctor by the collar. "What did you do to her?" Adam's breath came in ragged bursts, every nerve wired with desperation. "You tried to kill my daughter just to save your son from the consequences of driving under the influence?" Dr. Calloway struggled against Adam's grip, fear flickering in his eyes. "Get off me." He spat, but his bravado rang hollow now. "I only did what was necessary. My son's future was at stake. It's not my fault your daughter got herself involved." Adam's fist slammed into the doctor's jaw, sending him reeling. Calloway shouted for help, but the corridor was otherwise empty. Adam advanced, fury radiating from every fiber of his being. "You framed her, injected her with sedatives, lied about her lab results." Panic replaced the doctor's arrogance. "You'll go to prison for assault," he hissed, brandishing a hand that fumbled for the stair railing. "I'm a respected physician. Nobody's going to believe a biker's accusations." Before Adam could respond, uniformed hospital security arrived, accompanied by local police who had been called due to the earlier chaos. The tension crackled as officers separated the men. Dr. Calloway instantly spun his version of the incident, claiming Adam assaulted him unprovoked. This time, Adam didn't stand alone. Nurse Nancy appeared, USB drive clutched in her hand, accompanied by a fellow nurse and a lab technician who had caught wind of the scandal. "We've got proof, officer," Nancy announced. He falsified Joy Carter's medical records and illegally altered toxicology results. The officer's gaze flicked between Nancy, Dr. Calloway, and Adam. "I'm going to need that evidence," he said, his tone firm. Nancy handed over the USB, her face resolute. Dr. Calloway's composure began to crack. "Those files, they're stolen. I have the right to. You have the right to remain silent." The officer interjected, removing handcuffs from his belt. "We'll be reviewing these documents, and if they show what she claims, you'll be answering for more than record tampering." Moments later, Dr. Richard Calloway found himself in cuffs. He sputtered protests, insisting he was the victim and painting Adam as a violent thug. But staff who'd heard his earlier rant came forward, recounting how he'd treated Joy with excessive force and directed hateful remarks toward her. The doctor's carefully constructed facade came crashing down in a flurry of accusations. Meanwhile, Adam made a beeline for Joy's room, heart pounding at the memory of her dire condition. Inside, a new medical team, one not affiliated with Dr. Calloway, had taken over her care. Nurse Nancy joined them, insisting on a thorough review of Joy's chart to remove any misinformation. Joy stirred, her eyes slowly focusing on her father. "Dad," she whispered, her voice shaky but more coherent than before. "Is it over?" Adam gently smoothed her hair back. "Almost, kiddo. He's not going to hurt you again." Joy exhaled a trembling breath, relief softening her features. The next hours flew by in a whirlwind of statements to the police, hospital administrators investigating the scandal, and Adam calling upon his biker network for moral support. Word spread fast that Dr. Calloway had manipulated records to protect his own son, Ryan Calloway, who had caused the accident while under the influence. The hospital's board publicly vowed full cooperation with law enforcement. Outside, a sea of motorcycles arrived, engines echoing in solidarity. Adam's fellow riders gathered peacefully, holding signs demanding justice for Joy and accountability for unethical doctors. Local news outlets caught wind of the protest, broadcasting images of a determined community rallying behind a teenage girl who'd nearly been destroyed by the hospital's corruption. In Joy's room, Nurse Nancy offered a comforting smile as she adjusted the four. "Your vital signs are improving," she said. "Now that we've removed those unauthorized sedatives, you should recover well." Joy nodded weakly, relief washing over her. Adam stood by the window, watching the bikes line the street. "Looks like you've got quite an army out there," Joy murmured, a faint smile tugging at her lips. He turned back, eyes glistening with pride. "Every last one of them has your back. You're not alone, baby girl." Joy reached for her father's hand, feeling a measure of safety return for the first time since the crash. By evening, the hospital administration released a statement confirming Dr. Calloway's suspension pending a criminal investigation. Ryan Calloway, still recovering in a private suite, faced his own set of legal troubles for reckless driving and substance abuse. Finally, Joy was moved out of the critical care unit. Adam, exhausted but relieved, helped guide her down the hallway, supported by Nurse Nancy on her other side. Cameras flashed outside the main entrance as they exited. The protest broke into cheers. Joy, still fragile, leaned against her father, who wrapped a protective arm around her. Their story had become a lightning rod for broader issues: racial prejudice, abuse of power, and systemic injustice within healthcare. Yet in that moment, all Joy cared about was that she was free from the fear of Dr. Calloway, free from the false charges, and free to heal, both physically and emotionally. Adam helped her into a friend's car, as she was not yet ready to ride on a motorcycle. The journey home felt surreal. The sky blazed with the orange hues of late afternoon, and every breath Joy took felt like a victory. As the car rolled away from the hospital, Adam leaned in and whispered, "I've got you, Joy. Nothing will ever hurt you like that again. In the weeks that followed, the hospital launched a formal investigation into Dr. Richard Calloway's misconduct. Evidence of tampering and unethical behavior surfaced in abundance, making his guilt undeniable. Ryan Calloway, meanwhile, faced the consequences of driving under the influence, although his privileged background couldn't shield him from the legal aftermath forever. Adam Carter became an unlikely hero, his status as a legendary biker merging with that of a devoted father who refused to let prejudice stand unchallenged. Hundreds of bikers and concerned citizens continued to rally, ensuring the spotlight remained on the hospital's accountability and any hidden biases within its ranks. Nurse Nancy played a vital role in bringing the truth to light, risking her career for the sake of justice. Her bravery, combined with Adam's fierce determination, proved that when good people stand together, they can protect the vulnerable and force institutions to confront their failings. Joy Carter's recovery was steady, and she found comfort in the overwhelming support from her father's biker community and from strangers who admired her courage. Though her ordeal left emotional scars, she emerged stronger, determined to share her story so that no one else would suffer under prejudiced medical care. Over time, her voice became a symbol of resilience, echoing the simple but transformative idea that every life deserves dignity and fairness. The events at the hospital rippled far beyond one family, illuminating systemic issues that needed urgent reform. In the end, justice was served not merely by one brave act, but by a chorus of voices refusing to be silenced. Joy, Adam, and Nancy exemplified how confronting injustice can spark lasting change, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Their battle cry rang clear: the fight for what's right is always worth the cost.